And coming nearer to our day, of course Christopher Hitchens is right, and who could possibly dispute with him, that the abuse of children, of innocent children, is one, in fact it is the worst offence that anybody can commit. Of that, no doubt. But again he seems to think that the Catholic Church should have had some unique insight which demonstrably was lacking in society as a whole, and I'll give examples at the time. Let's remember that in the 1970s, not the Crusades, not the sack of Constantinople, but in the 1970s, the National Council for Civil Liberties in this country allowed the paedophile information exchange to affiliate to it. And the National Council for Civil Liberties had extremely respectable people at its head, including Harriet Harman and Patricia Hewitt. Would anybody seriously say that they condone child abuse? They were acting in the ignorance of the time. Magistrates at that time, some didn't even get before judges sometimes. Magistrates were awarding a few months in prison for that heinous crime. I myself, in the 1980s, trained as a Samaritan. One of the things we were taught was how to handle it when we got callers about child abuse. We were not taught then, because they didn't know, that actually there was no way that somebody who abused would simply stop. And it was only in the mid-1990s, and don't I know it because I was in the Home Office at the time, that we actually introduced in this country a register of sex offenders. Do not expect the Catholic Church somehow, when that was the state of knowledge at the time, to have acted in a unique and completely different way. In retrospect, yes, of course. In retrospect, yup. In retrospect, it should have done. So should the magistrates. So should the Samaritans. So should the National Council of Civil Liberties. But when we ask whether the Catholic Church is a force for good, let's just try to imagine a world today without, for example, the billions of pounds that are poured into overseas aid by the Catholic Church, contributing year on year more than any single nation. Imagine the developing world had been left without the input of the medicine and the education that was brought to it by the missions. Imagine the absence of those collections Sunday upon Sunday for famine relief. Imagine the absence of the church in the local community. I know well that when I was in the Department of Employment and in the Home Office and we were setting up initiatives, single regeneration budget, whatever it might be, we relied on the church, churches, every bit as much as we relied on local councils and on other organisations. We play a vital role. And you don't need to be a Catholic to acknowledge that we play that role. What is the Church? It is its members. It is the nuns and the monks and the priests and the lay workers and the congregations. It is not just the hierarchy of the Church. And I believe that the Church to which I belong is a massive, massive force for good. But let us not just keep the debate at that level. I knew somehow that when we were here tonight, we would be discussing child abuse and condoms. They came in the end. I almost thought we were going to get through an entire speech without condoms from Christopher Hitchens, but we got them at the end. If he has a creed, it would be, I believe in condoms. But that is not what the Catholic Church it isn't only about the physical relief of the poor. It isn't only about the work it does on earth, but it is the message that it preaches. And that message is one of hope. That message is one of salvation. And it is all very well for some people in their intellectual arrogance to say, we can do without that. But actually, billions of people across the world live by that message of hope and of salvation. They try to live by the commandments and also by the interpretation of those commandments by Christ. Yeah, sometimes they fail. Sometimes their leaders fail. Human beings do fail. But overwhelmingly, I say to you tonight with no apology or whatever, that a world without the Catholic Church would be poorer, would be more hopeless, and would be a worse place in which to live.